Welcome into Breaking the Huddle, everybody. I'm Joel Klatt. Listen, I am so excited about this show. We've got a lot to get into, and so I'm going to get into it fairly quickly. But first, this show, as always, is brought to you by Dr. Pepper. It is the one fans deserve. We got to talk about the new playoff rankings and maybe the path for USC, why all of this really pales in comparison to what we are about to have when the playoff expands. I've got X's and O's for USC and UCLA. I've got Big Ten West scenarios. Again, lots going on here towards the tail end of November. But let's get into it with the college football playoff rankings. Came out on Tuesday night. We all, watched and waited through the double overtime game. And then this is what we got. And it's basically exactly what we thought we were going to get. Georgia number 1, Ohio State 2, Michigan 3, TCU 4. Tennessee and LSU were at 5 and 6. There was some question, I think, and they tried to milk the drama a little bit of like, was USC going to creep all the way up to 6, in particular with LSU's performance last week on the road against Arkansas. It did not happen. So LSU moves up a spot after beating Arkansas, who really was banged up, and they beat them by 3. So, yeah, I mean, that happened. But USC is at number 7. And really, everybody knows the path for all of the teams in the top 6. The question then becomes, what's the path for USC? How does USC get into the playoff? And before I even start down the path, why don't we give Lincoln Riley a lot of credit? And there's a few of these coaches that are in their first year at these schools. Sonny Dykes at TCU, Brian Kelly at LSU, Dan Lanning at Oregon, Kalen DeBoer at Washington, Marcus Freeman at Notre Dame, Lincoln Riley at USC. Like, there's a lot of these guys that have done a heck of a job in their first year getting these teams into a position where they're playing meaningful games late in November, and Lincoln Riley is one of them. So what is the path for USC? Well, if you really look at this, what you would want is chalk in the SEC. So USC wants Georgia to win out. They want probably Ohio State to win out in the Big Ten. So then Ohio State and Georgia would clearly be in the college football playoff. At that point, then there's 2 spots, and I think from a USC perspective, the most advantageous thing for USC would be if TCU were to lose in their conference championship game. Let's say it's Kansas State, and Kansas State is able to beat them. Well, then TCU would only have 1 loss, yes, but they would not be a conference champion. Then you would be pitted up against a Tennessee team that would also be a non-champ and a 1 loss, and maybe even Clemson out of the ACC with 1 loss as a champion in the ACC. Here's why USC would have a really good argument is look at what their path is over the next 3 weeks and the teams that they're going to play. While they don't have a marquee win necessarily on the board yet outside of Oregon State, they will have the opportunity this week in the crosstown rivalry against UCLA in a ranked matchup. They would have Notre Dame next week that all of a sudden has some great wins, including the win over Clemson, and in a head-to-head argument, that would be a huge feather in their cap. And then potentially a Pac-12 championship game. Let's just say for sake of argument, it's Oregon. That'd be a good Oregon team. Let's say for sake of argument, it's Utah. Well, then they could avenge their 1 loss, which is Utah. So USC has got a path. And again, I think for them, they want a scenario where there's 5 teams arguing over 2 spots, and I think that as a champ, that they would have a really good argument. Now, why is this still somewhat of a bummer? Well, because it could be so much better. And I want to talk about that very briefly, because right now, currently, we have really 8 teams that have a legitimate argument for a college football playoff berth. That's if you include Clemson. And I can make an argument that even if Clemson wins out, they should not be included in any argument based on the way that Notre Dame has beat up on the ACC this year, including Clemson and who they will play in their ACC championship game, North Carolina. But if you take a look around, right now, there's not a lot of meaningful games as it relates to the playoff in college football, but there would be if we had a 12-team playoff. I want you to, and we just showed it right there, if there was a 12-team playoff as they have proposed in their proposal, that format, these are all the teams that would still be alive playing meaningful games as it relates to the postseason in the last 2 weeks of the regular season. There's 33 teams. Take a look at the SEC. You would have LSU and Georgia, obviously still alive. You would, and then in the at-large, have Tennessee and Alabama and Ole Miss. In the Big Ten, Michigan and Ohio State, yes, but also everybody in the Big Ten West, because there would be a defined path to the postseason. So all of those 5 teams. You would also have Penn State in there as an at-large. The Big 12, as wild and wacky as the Big 12 has been, look at all the teams that would be alive in the Big 12. TCU would be alive. Kansas would be alive. Texas, Texas Tech, Baylor, Kansas State. All of those teams alive, playing meaningful games late into November as it relates to the college football playoff. You would have group of 5 teams like Tulane and Coastal Carolina and Cincinnati. You would have more at-large teams like Notre Dame and Florida State. You would have, obviously, the ACC, Clemson and North Carolina. This would be so much better. Folks, we can only hope that this is going to come quickly as we possibly can get it, hopefully in 2024, because the expanded playoff is going to make these last 2 weeks so good. Penn State, in it, they would be playing meaningful games. That game, Utah and Oregon, would not have lost all of its luster because of Oregon's loss last week. It would be a massive game. I think that this would be and will be so much better for college football, because as it stands now, there's just far too few games late in the season that have true college football playoff implications. All right, coming up next, we have my X's and O's. I've got the crosstown rivalry game with Gus this Saturday night, USC and UCLA. So we got to break down their 2 best players, Caleb Williams and Zach Charbonnet, the running back for the Bruins. I break them down next. All right, so welcome back to the show. I want to get into these 2 offenses that I'll be covering this Saturday, UCLA and USC, because they're both incredible, and they're both kind of built around their best players. And for UCLA, that's their running back, Zach Charbonnet. This guy has been totally dominant, by the way. If you look at what he's done in Pac-12 play, he's rushing the ball for over 8 yards per carry, 159 yards per game, 12 touchdowns and 20 attempts per game in Pac-12 play. Like, he's been sensational. Well, how do they do it? Well, let's start with UCLA. Okay, they've got different styles of run game as we kind of go up and take a look. So they'll run the inside zone a little bit. They'll run this duo or man blocking scheme that I'll show you, and then the stretch and outside zone. The key, though, is that Charbonnet has to have a little bit different timing and patience for each one of these, and he's an experienced enough back to execute all of these really well. Let me show you what I mean. Let's start with inside zone. This is the one that, like, most people kind of understand and know. So this play is against Oregon, and what UCLA is going to have in front of them is that they're going to see a run box that only has 6 defenders. They've got 6 to block them, okay? So we're ready to go. So it's just an easy handoff, and he's got to allow that block to take place at the second level. See these guys get up to the linebackers, and that little patience and hesitation allows him to have the bigger lane, and then he's able to burst through and take off, and it's a big play for them. Even Dorian Thompson-Robinson is down the field. So there's just a small amount of hesitation right at the top, and then he can find that lane and get downhill. That hesitation is there because he needs his linemen to have time to get up to the linebackers. That second level block is really important. So what's different when you get a duo scheme or a man blocking scheme? A lot of people don't really understand what duo is. It's hard to explain. Think of it as like power without the puller. And if that doesn't mean anything to you, basically if zone, you're all blocking play side, then duo, you block back in a man style, and then the back goes front side. So a blocking back, man goes front side. Let's take a look at it. Okay, so this one is against Utah, and you really need to equate numbers. Utah walks 7 up in the run box, so they only got 6 to block. Let's motion a wide receiver in. Good scheme by Chip Kelly. So you got the block right there, and then you see the block back, and so this lane's going to open up, and watch how there's no hesitation. In a man downhill scheme, he gets the ball and he's gone right away. There's not that little hesitation, and there's subtleness to this now. It's not like it's a huge difference from the zone blocking scheme and hesitation, but he's gonna get downhill and be more decisive with that ability in the run game. So we've seen inside zone, we've seen the man blocking, that duo scheme getting right downhill. Let's take a look at stretch, because this is also very different. He's got to have the patience to run sideways toward the sideline for a long time and wait for the hole to open up. Not that it's always going to be stretched towards the front side, but he's waiting for a cutoff point by his offensive line in order to then get upfield. Let's take a look. Okay, so this one is against Arizona last week. So they're going to run the stretch play to us here towards the wide side of the field. Watch as he's going to stretch, and now he's got the blocks at the second level. He gets a turn by the center. He gets a turn by the guard, and he finds the lane in the stretch. So patience. Now I find it. Now I'm going to get up there, and I'm going to creep into the secondary, and I'm going to find some positive yards. So 3 distinctly different styles of run that he can execute really well. He's an excellent back. He understands the nuance of every scheme that they run, and it's one of the reasons why they're right now number 1 in the country in terms of yards per carry as a team. They're facing, by the way, a USC defense, not great as far as stopping the run. They're 97th right now in the country in terms of rushing per carry defense. Okay. Let's go to Caleb Williams. Okay, so that's Zach Charbonnet for UCLA. What does Caleb Williams do really well? Well, Caleb Williams can hurt you in any possible way as a quarterback. See, as a quarterback, all of us are trying to throw in rhythm. So like that's in rhythm, you go 1, 2, 3, boom, and then there's a nice hitch step sometimes, or maybe it's right on the firm step and then you throw the ball. So if you're throwing and playing in rhythm, lots of quarterbacks can hurt a defense playing in rhythm. Lots of them. Very few can then hurt a defense on the run. That takes arm talent. That takes the ability to keep your eyes up, down the field, and then still be able to throw accurately and in particular stretch the field when you're on the run. I think it takes more talent. There's certainly some more nuance to that. He even goes a step further. The fadeaway. Hold that thought. I'll get to that one last. Let's take a look at in rhythm. What do all quarterbacks dream of? The ability to hurt the defense down the field throwing in rhythm. He did it last week. This is coming off a little play action. It's a wide formation. So as we draw these routes out, take a look at this guy. He's all the way down here low. Why do they do that? Well, to bring the safety closer to the field side so you can throw that skinny post. And did you see him? He was just like, boom, hitch up, bam. And he drove the football right down the field. So when you're in rhythm, and when Caleb Williams, more importantly, is in rhythm, he can really hurt the opposing defense, and he did it last week. Let's take a look at his ability to improvise and throw on the run, because this is also very dangerous, and he does it as well as anybody in the country. This one is against Washington State. So as the defensive end is going to win here on his pass rush, that's a win. Now Williams is going to have to step up. Okay, so the guard and center do their job. They keep them structure of the pocket. He's able to step up. Eyes up, and then boom, a flick of the arm. I mean, he's a couple of steps on the run, and he comes out and just zoom. That ball is down the field. That's not an easy throw. He does it because the ball stays up on his frame. He doesn't bring it down. He doesn't tuck it. Ball stays up on his frame. His eyes stay up, and he's ready to just push it back and boom, let it rip. Impressive stuff. That's one of the reasons why he's so dangerous, but then he can go a step further. The fadeaway. What are you talking about the fadeaway? Is this like Michael Jordan fadeaway style, right? Late Michael Jordan? Kind of. Let's take a look at the fadeaway. This is against Utah. And when you got a quarterback like this, then the coach is going to put an immense amount of trust in him. How do I know that? There's an unblocked player inside the 5. You're trying to stretch out here with the motion man and then sneak the tight end into the end zone. But the quarterback has to have the disposition where he's fine with somebody right in his face because they intentionally did not block the defensive end. You think about the trust that it takes from Lincoln Riley to say, okay, buddy, you're my Heisman contending quarterback. We're not going to block the defensive end inside the 5. And I just want you to kind of drift back and fade away and read it out. One, it takes immense arm talent. It takes an immense amount of courage from your quarterback. I can tell you that right now. Guess what's not fun? Seeing any unblocked player as a quarterback. And here's Caleb Williams inside the 5. He gets a little fake, and he's supposed to not only read it out, but read it out with an unblocked defensive end. Why? Because he's got the fadeaway. Boom. And he's able to just dip back, find the tight end, and delivers the dime. That's why he's so good, because he can do everything. And that's not even everything, because he can hurt you running the football. But throwing the ball, he hurts you in rhythm. He can hurt you on the run, improvising out of the pocket. And then they've got so much faith in him, he can even go to the fade away. All right, coming up next on Breaking the Huddle, we got to iron out this Big Ten West. What are the scenarios in the Big Ten West? Who is going to be facing the winner of Michigan and Ohio State in Indianapolis? I will break it down for you next. All right, lots of scenarios still available and open in the Big Ten West. So the Big Ten West, we know the East, right? Winner, Michigan, Ohio State, they go to Indianapolis. In the Big Ten West, though, there's all sorts of scenarios, including the fact nobody controls their own destiny. So what's going on? Well, there's 5 teams available. Let's take a look. There's 5 teams available or alive right now. Wisconsin is a long shot, so I'm going to put them on the back burner for a moment. I want to talk about the other 4, and let's start with Illinois. Oh, let's actually start with Purdue. So Purdue, they would have to win both of their games, and then if you couple that with an Iowa loss down the stretch, then Purdue goes. Iowa, they would go with win in their 2 games, and an Illinois loss. Illinois goes with a win in each of their last 2 games and a Purdue loss. Then Minnesota, they would have to win both of their remaining 2 games and have Illinois and Purdue both lose a game. All hell has to break loose for Wisconsin, so that kind of goes by the wayside. So what's the most likely scenario? Well, then you have to look at the matchups. Let's just play this out in our head for a moment. Illinois has to go to Michigan this week. It's likely that Illinois loses that game, okay? Right? I mean, they're 18-point dogs in that game. So if they were to lose that game, then Iowa controls their own destiny because remember, Iowa is reliant on an Illinois loss. So then Iowa would have to win their remaining 2 games in order to go to Indianapolis for the 2nd straight year. They would have to win at Minnesota and against Nebraska at home. Can their defense score enough points? Right? I mean, that's what it's come down to for Iowa. I don't know if I trust Iowa on the road at Minnesota. Which then, if Illinois and Iowa were both to lose, then guess who controls their own destiny? Purdue. And Purdue plays against Northwestern at home and at Indiana. I know that one of those is a rivalry of sorts. That's the most likely scenario, folks. If I had to bet money, I think Purdue is your likeliest Big Ten West winner based on the matchups and who I trust in those games. But I think it's likely going to land in the lap of Iowa first. They'll have the first right of refusal because as soon as Illinois were to lose to Michigan, if they do, and we think that that's likely, Iowa controls their own destiny. And then Minnesota, again, they would just have to wait and see, win their games, and hope that Illinois loses to Michigan and that Purdue loses to either Northwestern or Indiana. Again, not likely. So your likeliest, I'm saying likely a lot, likeliest participant from the Big Ten West, Purdue or Iowa. All the scenarios boiled down to that. Coming up next, we've got a little Klattback here as we finish things off on this edition of Breaking the Huddle. Welcome back to the program. We're going to get to some Klattback here in just a moment. But before I go out and talk to those people on Twitter, I just want to say I love cupcakes. I love cupcakes a lot. I eat cupcakes any chance I get an opportunity. Red velvet with a little cream cheese frosting sounds delicious, right? Traditional chocolate with little sprinkles on top. Eat it up. Maybe a little milk in there. Yeah, my 8-year-old will come out for that as well. I don't like cupcakes in college football. So thanks a lot. Here it is, November 19th, and we're about to have a cupcake week, and I hate it. Austin Peay and Tuscaloosa, give me a break. Louisiana and Florida State, come on. What are we doing? Eastern Tennessee State at Mississippi State? Really, Mike Leach? You don't even have to swing your sword. That's terrible. UMass and A&M. Actually, for A&M, winnable game, finally. And it's appeared. Here it is in the form of a cupcake. This one is more like a chocolate with like caramel on top. And UAB at LSU. Thanks a lot for nothing, right? I mean, like cupcakes in November. I think it's stupid, and I hope it goes away forever at some point in college football. Now let's get out to Twitter. That was a little just Klattback just at the scheduling department in like, let's say, those 2 conferences. But now we get to Klattback. And Alex chimes in, and Alex, clearly an Ohio State fan. I was complimenting Michigan's defense, which, by the way, is number 1 in the country in scoring defense, total defense, rushing defense, and I was like, hey, they're pretty good on defense. They haven't played anybody. An average offensive ranking of 100. They look better because of playing a much worse schedule. You are in the same division. You can't rip on their schedule and say they haven't played anybody because you basically play the same schedule. Like, what, are you going to argue that, like, Notre Dame is a juggernaut offensively? Like, at this point, you're just insecure. Alex, the insecure Ohio State fan. Michigan's pretty good. And guess what? You're going to have an opportunity to beat them next week in the shoe. Let's move on. Insecure Alex. Sean chimes in. I do like the picture, though, of Lane Kiffin. He says, C.J. Stroud, ? This in reference to me saying C.J. Stroud is a Heisman favorite. He says, laugh my ass off. Can I say that? Yeah, sure I can. Come on, Joel. Putting him up there hurts your credibility. So is Vegas's credibility hurt? I'm sorry. When I acknowledge a fact that C.J. Stroud is the betting favorite for the Heisman Trophy, that hurts my credibility? Are you blind? Clearly. Sean the blind man is out here saying C.J. Stroud is hurting my credibility. This is what I deal with, folks. Like, this is what's out there. You better hope you're never arrested. These are the type of people that are on your jury. Think about that. That'll straighten you up. Last one. Here we go. Ags by 90 million. Everyone putting all the blame on Jimbo has not been paying attention. The play calling does suck, but the main issue has been injuries to our offensive line and bad defensive play calling. We are also 4 possessions away from 8-3. Listen, I have a business proposition for you. I have this incredible villa, beautiful views of the Pacific Ocean just outside of Flagstaff. I'll only charge you $9 million for it. Just wire the money right on over. Ags by $1 million. You're delusional. So now we've got insecure, we've got blind, and we've got delusional. Really? 4 possessions away from 8-3? You're a couple of lucky possessions away from being a 1-win team right now. That'll do it for Breaking the Huddle. I'm Joel Klatt. This show, as always, is brought to you by Dr. Pepper. Remember, it is the one fans deserve. We'll see you next week, everybody.